has been over a month since we last chatted, so we have lots to discuss. Can you guess what one topic we are not going to discuss?
The Toronto Blue Jays.
That's correct. Not one more word said about them on this podcast, probably for this whole year. So we'll leave it at that. And I will happily discuss any other topics, music and tech, that you may have for us.
I'm right there with you because the BC Lions in the Canadian Football League are 1-5 as of the time we're talking.
That's tough. Weren't they so good last year?
Yep. Moments away from the Grey Cup, but we are now down to our second and third quarterbacks. So yeah, nothing looking good.
Similar stories then. Well, we could commiserate, but distract ourselves by thinking about the happy state of the music industry.
Well, what about, did you tune into any of the soccer? Was that on your radar, or to what extent?
Not a ton. Like if it was on at a restaurant or bar I was at, I guess I would watch. I never really set aside any time. Were you following any team particularly closely?
I ended up having a really fun weekend at the end because I watched, there was like a third place playoff game, which was crazy. There were so many goals. It was so fun. And I watched the final with like a whole bunch of family. And then we went out. It was like a really hot, sunny day. This was like 1 or 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And we went to the park and kicked a ball around with some of my younger in-law cousins, and like some other random people in the park joined us, and we had like the soccer game. So really kind of like community building moment on the end of the World Cup final. So I mean, that was kind of fun. I watched the final. I watched the two Canada games that had the most notoriety live, I guess. There was the one against Qatar where they scored tons of goals, and then there was the one against Switzerland. Yeah. These are both in the group stage. I actually didn't watch Canada's loss to Morocco, but I watched those two because I was having my garage sale with my mom at the time of Canada's loss to Morocco, which also went really well. So a lot has been happening over the last month for both you and I, that's for sure.
Big month with the jazzfest and FIFA. I will say I was... we talked a little bit about the kind of unfortunate consequences of like FIFA taking over a lot of the festival space, cultural space in Vancouver, as far as attention and whatnot. It was nice to have a vibrant city full of visitors, for a couple of weeks, for a limited time. I think I eventually was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to normal, but it was more fun than I expected overall in the city.
I just want to drop 2 data points. One of them was I was at this show at the festival at Ocean Artworks, and it was the pop artist and DJ Devours, and double billed with Walgren, fiddle player, singer-songwriter, artist. But Devours, he did a bit of stage banter where he was like, so how's everybody feeling about FIFA, to like a big Ocean Artworks crowd. Pin drop silence.
Different crowd, man. Very different crowd. That's really funny. I believe someone booed FIFA during maybe Madeline's workshop or something. Right. I think that anyone involved in the Jazz Fest rightfully could be a little grumpy about how that all played out for them.
And then the other thing was there was this weird timing issue. It was actually at the stage where I played, where you popped down in the rain to come here at Western Red Cedar play, which was awesome. But there were a couple more bands who played that same stage, Bentall Center downtown. And there was it was not what we now know as the FIFA Fan Festival. Like it was not the officially sanctioned parties, but there was a bar, I guess, in the Bentall Center complex that was doing its own watch party. And they messed with somebody's set times. Like I think they made them start late and finish early because of weird timing stuff related to how they wanted to run their watch party. So yeah, it was a bit of a mess.
That is messy, and I guess there was probably some of that disruption to be expected. Like no matter how this is all going to shake out, like there was disruption in general, right? Because the festival had to change its dates, couldn't advertise anything, right, in most of the areas where they would like to. I think you weren't allowed to have like big flyers or whatever downtown, billboards and whatnot within a certain radius. So yeah, I think probably was a net negative on the city's culture for a month or so, and I'm sure not worth whatever Vancouver ended up paying for it in taxpayer dollars.
I was fielding questions sometimes. People are like, "Oh, do you think the attendance and just like the footfall around the jazz festival increased because of this?" And I said, "Well, maybe, but not really. Like, not to my eyes, noticeably, really. I mean, there were a lot of good days. There were some bad weather days. July 1st was crazy, like it always is.
Yeah,
would have been anyways. There was an official fan festival watch party right there on Granville Island.
Yeah,
that overlapped with some of the stuff. So I mean, it's hard to say, but I mean, at the ticketed shows, I doubt it. Like, I don't think there's very much overlap there in terms of just people coming to Vancouver for this long event, like ending up buying tickets to some of these things. I doubt it.
Yeah, I doubt it too. Different demographics. But we made it. Oh, there was a lot of doom and gloom leading up to it, and it was like, some ups and some downs. It was okay.
It was a real we made it feeling for me throughout that whole 3-week period. That's exactly what it was, because there were things going on personally in my life, my family, and I was going places, and I was out all the time, and I was not working, and then I had to catch up on work, and then I capped it all off with like watching the finals and going out to play soccer with my family, and then I felt like, okay, I made it.
What was the final count on Jazz Fest shows you attended?
I made it an even 50.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I think that's more than I did in the past even, yeah.
How many jazz jams? How many late nights?
I went to Tyrant 6 times. I maybe stuck around for the jam 3 or 4 times.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's 6 times more than I went to Tyrant this year, and 3 or 4 times more than I went to the jam this year, but it all seemed very fun.
Story to discover, Tyrant Studios are getting a new piano as of when this is dropping. This August long weekend, they're getting a new piano, so I'm very excited to see that.
That's big news. How are they going to get it up there? Crane through the roof?
I don't know. I'm terrified to find out.
How are they going to get the old one out is another question. Well, the Vancouver Jazz Fest seemed like, again, maybe a little bit less foot traffic, but a success. Do you think everyone in Vancouver in the Jazz Fest got paid or is getting paid?
Yes, I do, and I know firsthand actually that is the case, but that's a whole other story. That's not what we're talking about.
Good.
We're gonna talk about something else. It's actually it's a funny combination, this story that I've lined up today, of like kind of playing the hits, because it's got a little bit of some things we've talked about before and some stories that are just around us. Like, it's got a little bit of side door. I guess the difference between this and the side door episode is that I didn't like do any original research about this story, because I didn't really need to, because it's been told. It's been told pretty well. But it definitely has some side door vibes. It involves Nova Scotia, just like side door. It has some 2023 Fort Langley vibes, which is a Rhythm Changes story, not an Upsample joint. But that is a situation where locally here, famously, a festival didn't pay its artists on time. It has a little bit of a whole bunch of these different things, and it is about the East Coast Music Association, which the same acronym ECMEA, it also refers to the East Coast Music Awards, which is an event that it puts on. For those of us here in BC, this is their direct analog to what we have, which is called BreakOut West and the Western Canadian Music Awards. That's our regional second tier thing that's underneath the Junos here in Canada, but at a regional level. This is the East Coast Music Awards.
Nice. And yeah, I see the first the first headline in our doc here is "Does the Fort Langley," which is a dark way of putting that. But so was there issues with payment from the award ceremony, a festival of some sort, or how did that all shake
So in
out?
some sense, this is not a new story, because most of what we're going to talk about happened in 2024 and 2025. Okay. But there is a new layer to it, which is at the beginning of this week, there's a Global News article I saw that talked about how people who played this year's edition of the ECMAs, the 2026 ones, which I believe they happen every May, and it rotates through which sub-region or which province of the Atlantic provinces it happens in. But this edition, there are artists who played at the showcases, just like, again, here we know people, our friends, they play at BreakOut West. There were artists who played the showcases and they have not been paid 2 months later, which is very much like what happened at Fort Langley. And now there's a global news story about it. Some artists who performed as part of the East Coast Music Association's annual awards in Sydney, Nova Scotia this year are speaking out over payment issues. Global News has heard from artists who say they had to wait more than 2 months for payment, with some receiving less than their agreed amount, and in some cases, nothing at all. Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it sounds really familiar. Tough. Yeah. Okay.
Continuing, many artists were told the issues stemmed from delays in receiving funding. The current executive director, and we'll talk about succession at the position in a bit, but the current executive director is Bob Hallett. Hallett says that a quarter of the association's $1.5 million annual budget is currently outstanding. Quote, I don't think it's true that the artists weren't prioritized, but in order to pay it out fully, I guess we would have needed a significant amount of funds available the day the event was over, which was just not the case, said Hallett.
Okay. So the festival ends, they've contracted these people to, do these showcases, and then the festival ends and they're like, well, we actually have to recoup some other outstanding budget, I guess, to be able to pay these artists. Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, he's saying there's not enough money in the bank, that they didn't have it figured out. And he's talking this week about this. He's quoted in the piece. So we're 2 months out and he's still talking about this.
So
it does say, he says the organization is stable, but yeah, there's something going on here, isn't there?
Yeah, because if you didn't have it up front, it's not magically going to appear 2 months after the event, right? Your ticket sales are done, and hopefully you've, reconciled those. That's a very weird state of affairs.
It is very weird, and it reminded me of hearing about this story in 2024, 2025. It reminded me that I never actually went in and checked out what happened here. What was the ECMA's controversy? Because I remember hearing about it. I kind of remember one of the people, but this jogged my memory about that story, and I was like, okay, I got to find out what happened here. And I can talk to Carson about it because I bet he hasn't looked into this one. So we're going to go back and we're going to look at a succession issue that they had at the ECMAs where they hired a CEO and there was serious friction, and the ECMAs have never been the same and they may never will be. So we're going to go back to November 2023. Okay. And that's when the ECMAs post a CEO job position. Okay. They talk about how their longtime CEO of 9 years is stepping down. They're looking for the ideal candidate. They solicit applications at the end of 2023 for CEO. Keep in mind, mainly what the ECMAs do is they present this awards show every May. They rotate it around the regions, and artists have to apply. It's kind of like you apply to the Junos or the Grammys or anything. The stock model was that the artists would pay to apply to different awards categories. They would showcase for nominal fees, like a couple $100. These artists are they're still waiting to get even those couple $100 today. Yeah. For the showcases. But that's the main thing they do, is they present this awards show weekend.
Cool. Okay.
So they hire their new CEO, and it is a cellist and arts administrator by the name of Blanche Israel, who is of partially Moroccan descent, I believe. Goes by Blanche most parts of the internet. Is a graduate of U of T Arts Management, prior experience with the NYO, which is Canada's National Youth Orchestra, and with Canadian Opera Company.
Cool.
Blanche assumes a CEO position as of March 1st, 2024. And she positions herself as the fresh voice who has bold ideas for what this organization can be and can do, and has been hired to do that, right? Yeah. So, she goes on her initial media tour, does a radio interview on a show called Main Street PEI at CBC, interviewed by a guy named Matt Rainey, and she says, traditionally, the ECMAs have really focused on celebration and on the awards. I think we have the opportunity and a responsibility to be present year-round. She also says that she wants, quote, to build and radiate out the narrative of what it is to be a musician on the East Coast today.
Okay.
So very, very nice message, hitting the ground running. One of her biggest musical credits on her CV is that she's played cello with Jeremy Dutcher,
Okay.
I heard Jeremy Dutcher at the 2024 Vancouver Folk Music Festival, and it was amazing. I don't know if you've ever listened to his music or heard him.
Never checked him out.
There's a mid episode rec for you there
Right.
to listen to Jeremy Dutcher. Very, very cool artist.
Sweet.
Very, very memorable concert there at the Folk Fest 2 years ago. But that's one of the things, I guess, that she's most known for, and that's one of her reference points. And Jeremy Dutcher is connected to New Brunswick, I guess, as his home province. So there's the connection to the ECMEAs. This is like an artist who is a prominent export of the region.
Got it. So she's really taking what is like maybe a fairly narrow and regional kind of one time of the year thing and saying like, let's try to kind of expand the scope of what the ECMAs can do or does, right? Like to go from this like presenting an awards show to maybe doing more, which seems maybe ambitious given like what maybe budgets they have or what like actual amount of, cultural clout or cachet they have, but that seems like a good ambition.
Yeah, because I guess what we're going to do as we go through this whole story is we're going to try and get a read of what Blanche's full mission was and to what happened when she tried to implement it and how we feel about that mission. It will become clear because it's going to get tense pretty soon here.
Okay.
In October of 2024, there's a petition that drops, and the petition is titled ECMEA, A Call for Transparency and Stability. And this petition is started by a woman by the name of Sherry Jones, who is an area artist manager with her firm Jones & Co. Artist Management, represents people such as Joel Plaskett, Dovenett Doyle, the songwriter Gordie Sampson, who I included in my award-winning 30 Greatest Living Canadian Songwriters list at Rhythm Changes.
Great.
Big East Coast veteran artist manager starts this petition, and it's subtitled Addressing Recent Changes at the ECMA, A Call for Transparency and Stability. For decades, ECMA has played a pivotal role. We've helped build careers. We've contributed to the economy. However, recent sweeping changes within the ECMA have raised concerns among its members in the broader music industry. Long-standing contractors with deep institutional knowledge have been let go, and significant modifications have been made to the awards application process. These decisions were made without consulting the very people the ECMA exists to serve, the artists, industry professionals, and cultural stakeholders of Atlantic Canada. And all the news articles at the time talk about how there's like 500 plus signatures. You can see we've landed at 656 signatures. Yep. So, circulated within a small music community, but this is a public repudiation of the direction that Blanche was taking as the newly appointed CEO during her first 6 months. So it is now playing into the public and with prominent people in the industry.
Interesting. So I guess my first question is like, I'm guessing the ECMAs don't actually have any obligation to consult artists, like no like actual contractual or legal obligation to consult with artists, industry professionals, and cultural stakeholders of Atlantic Canada if they want to make big changes like this, right? Like this is a private, semi-private organization that's like doing a thing that, yes, like on paper is serving some service, but really they probably don't literally owe anything to anyone if they want to. I'm assuming this means like, people got either fired or left, or they've made some changes and the artists aren't that happy with it, but like found a new awards show is maybe my first reaction to that.
And it seems like the person who's raising the biggest stink about is somebody who represents a lot of the people who are the currently the most commercially successful, maybe just Nova Scotia, but Atlantic people. So what were some of these changes? Well, I poked around some news articles at the time to find out what the changes to the submission process, to the awards application process. What are those changes? From this Canadian Press article, I found new awards submission guidelines put less weight on streaming data and ask musicians for a written explanation of why their music should be considered for nomination. You see what they're doing there?
That's
they're changing the category. They're changing the evaluation. So it's not it's not about commercial. It's more like a college application essay vibe, where it's like, why should you? And then I found the CBC article that says the same thing. Changes include new submission criteria that now ask musicians for a written explanation on why their music should be nominated instead of prioritizing commercial success and marketing. And then Sherry Jones is quoted in the CBC article, and she says, these awards were put in place to recognize commercial success. Music is very subjective. It could be a terrible song recorded in your bedroom, and if 6 million people streamed it, that's a commercial success. Whether or not you or I think that's a good song, 6 million people liked it. They don't read that way anymore. Now it is based more on the art and the intent.
Well, that really, says the quiet part out loud, right? It's just like, these used to be almost a like industry fest. And now it's like, something closer to like the Polaris or something with like artistic merit, which I'm sure most artists would be happy with, right? And it's like, someone who represents very, popular, commercially popular and successful artists to say like, well, hey now, shouldn't we at least consider that Dan Mangan or whoever gets like millions of plays on the album, which like awesome. First of all, that's very cool. My second reaction would be that might be enough reward on its own, especially in like a small Atlantic thing. You're trying to, cater towards up and coming artists who need the boost.
And there are more news articles from around this time where Blanche cites, we have a doubling of Indigenous applicants. We have a huge percentage increase year on year in applicants, people of color, and that there's an objective there that seemed to have succeeded in terms of making those changes to the awards application process. So that's a big initial layer of how she went about delivering on those ideas that she talked about in that radio interview after she got the job. She's like, I want to be more artist oriented, and I want to represent more people. I want to change what's traditionally been about because I'm trying to open the door. This is kind of to me, it seems like a good faith attempt by her to do that.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, in January 2025, Blanche is fired as CEO.
Ooh.
So this is less than a year after she started.
So there's a board, there's a board for the ECMAs, and they were, I guess, displeased with the changes. Yeah.
Yeah. The letter announcing the news that's on the ECMA letterhead that they emailed out talks about how the board has undertaken a thorough review of leadership and operations. During this process, it became clear that a change was necessary to ensure alignment with our organizational values and strategic objectives. Man, that's a lot of buzzwords.
I feel like I'm back at work, man. That's crazy.
After careful consideration, the board of directors decided to part ways with its current CEO, Blanche Israel. We believe this change is in the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders.
Interesting. So that, maybe shows a little more on its face, like what this institution is actually for, right? That like Sherry Jones kind of out loud said that this should be for commercial success. This is like an industry thing. And obviously Blanche disagreed, probably a bunch of artists disagreed, but the board was like, no, that's right. Like, or clearly whoever the stakeholders of this institution are the kind of commercial end of music in Eastern Canada.
And then Blanche posts to Facebook. In the lengthy post, she does get into an interesting segment that I snipped where she says, I met Sherry Jones relatively recently. When I started in the role, she graciously reached out to me, meeting with me one-on-one a couple of times. I thanked her for welcoming me into the fold and shared with her, I just want to do a good job. She replied, well, you can't be any worse than Andy. It's referring to the previous 9-year CEO. Jeez. Blanche continues, that comment seemed harsh, and I felt fortunate to be in her good graces. I could tell she was someone not to be crossed.
Yeah, clearly. Man, that's wild.
Doesn't get any better. We're now in January, and there's supposed to be a 2025 ECMEAs coming up in May, right?
Right, yeah.
So in February 2025, multiple board members reportedly leave.
Okay.
Somewhere between 2 and 6, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
In March, Jeremy Dutcher withdraws his ECMA nominations in solidarity with the former bandmate Blanche.
Interesting.
And
nice.
declines to be up and declines to participate, citing that it's not a comfortable situation for artists, and like artist to artist, we need to be on this side.
Yeah.
There's multiple artists who take this stance of withdrawing their nominations. There are staff resignations. There's one in March. There's one later in June. And then the board has to do a damage control letter, which they do in mid-March, a month or two, I guess 2 months before when this edition of the ECMAs was going to take place. The board put out a blog post. We should have said this sooner. We are accountable. It's never a good title. This may have been authored by Sherry herself because it got cross-posted onto the petition page as well.
I mean, looking at it, I can tell you exactly who authored it.
ChatGPT. Yeah. How did you know that?
Big ol' M dash after
in the first sentence, in the first 5 words.
Even just saying we're not going to sugar. I swear a coding agent today probably told me I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Dash dash, explaining how badly it screwed up some change I was asking it to make, and just I'm like allergic to that type of prose now.
Oh man, let's get into this damage control letter. So, as you said, Opens, we're not going to sugarcoat it. This has been a really difficult time for ECMA. We made the decision to part ways with our former CEO because by December 2024, we saw serious risks to the ECMA event. There was lost institutional knowledge, decisions being made without board approval, and legal risks we couldn't ignore. At that point, we had to act to get things back on track. And as unfortunate as it is, we had to accept a difficult choice. We recognize and regret that the way we handled it left members feeling blindsided. That's on us. That's on us is another key phrase, isn't
That's
it?
maybe even more telling than we're not going to sugarcoat it, M dash. That's on us is also, again, I believe today I had a coding agent tell me that, hey, and that's on me. And it doesn't help. Doesn't it's miserable.
I'm not going to name any names here, but I'm going to remember this when I see artists who are applying for consideration to be released on a certain label, and the owner of that label, and them they're going back and forth through their respective LLMs. And if somebody disagrees with something, I'm going to watch for who is the first one to say that's on us.
Yeah, that's great. Oh man, that's really funny. Yeah, first sentence, I could see that from a mile away.
Everybody agrees this is not what anybody wanted. There's backlash at the awards. Not only were there artists in advance who decided to strike their nominations, but people who did show up and win awards took the stage and talked about how, we need to have artist solidarity around Blanche in this area, and we need to collaborate and we need to figure this out. So it's all gone off the rails.
Wow.
There's a long-time employee, like I mentioned, there was a June staff resignation. This long-time administrator who resigns and talks about how stressful it was. And then eventually we arrive at just under a year ago now, August of 2025, and Blanche posts some videos on Instagram. And this is where the rubber hits the road in terms of what we've been alluding to so far. It's like, who is this for? Who are the ECMAs for? The purpose of a system is what it does. What is it doing? And she takes a really striking, incisive look at this and looks at how much ECMA paid to artists, showcasing artists and other things. I'm not sure what all the different avenues that pay to artists are, their grants or what, but she looks at how much the organization paid to artists in general as a line item on the year's budget, and nets out the application fees that the artists pay, which is like, $50 to $100 every time you submit to something, and finds out that, the organization has only distributed maybe 100,000 of artists of expenses that end up in the pockets of artists, and all the other expenses are so much larger than that. And so she frames this as, well, okay, this organization is maybe kind of this make work project that is for the benefit of the industry and the contractors who are working on this awards show and who are on staff at this organization and all the other vendors who chip into that. And maybe are we just running this ship to create this gig for these people who are probably our friends, and we're like not really adding value to these artists' lives. We're asking them to pay to submit to things. We're not paying them that much. And now in 2026, we're not paying them on time either.
Yeah.
Is this kind of like a make work project? And does it benefit this specific club of people? It does seem to be a gender parity club. It's not an old boys club, but like it's an old club of the music industry in Atlantic Canada. And ideally, I think Blanche wishes to wisely. This is the thing about Blanche that I'm picking up, is that she really knows her stuff about nonprofit arts, and like the points that she raises, and she has a Substack now, and we're going to get into that a little bit too, about how she's been communicating directly with people in the years since up till now. But she really understands how this stuff works. Evidence to that is she's like, well, if we just shut down the ECMA organization, if it dies, all the public funding that it was getting and all the receipts that it was getting that it could distribute to artists will shut off. It's not like the money will sit there in waiting for the next arts organization to take up the mantle. Somebody will just scrub that from their budget and the money will be lost. So instead of wanting to the organization to just die, she seems to wish that you could either like slowly reappropriate the funds from it to other initiatives in the same dollar amount, but trying to maximize how many of those dollars go to artists.
Yeah.
Or when she was CEO, it felt like she was trying to do that from the inside, like to get the organization to start, of the total budget pie, how much of it can we make sure ends up in artist pockets? That's where I started to get the sense of, okay, I think that was her mission.
Yes. Yeah. It sounds like it. And you could see, I guess, that more budgetary angle, like really ruffling a board's feathers, right? Like if the money has been going a certain direction this whole time, then changing anything, no matter how it nets out, probably does not appease a board of directors.
Yes, and a key phrase in her Substack, which is called the breakwater, that she later wrote this year: I want that public money to keep flowing. I just want more of it to reach artists.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so she really understands what's up. She makes a second video where, this is still not known for sure exactly what the ramifications are, but this is almost getting into joloew territory, where she looks at the bylaws and suggests that the board hasn't met its required size or composition at various times, and so maybe they weren't allowed to make the decision maybe they didn't have a quorum to fire her, or I don't think that specifically she wanted to be reinstated, but she was like, oh, has this board been ignoring the rules while they're trying to pretend that they're the ones who deserve to steer the ship? So she makes 2 Instagram videos and blows it open, I guess, by talking about it. And this is at the same time that there's this guy, Bob Hallett, who is now the executive director. They don't have somebody in the CEO position anymore.
Okay.
They just don't have that. There is a big article in The Coast, which is like an independent media outlet for, I believe, Nova Scotia or maybe Atlantic Canada. That's, it's almost like The Walrus is like a Canadian national thing, and The Coast is almost like a local version of that. And this article in The Coast, it gets into what Blanche talked about in those videos, and it reports on a little bit and expands it. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where the meat of the story ended, until this like post 2026 ECMA payment issue. It ended unresolved, where Blanche got kicked out. They kind of pretended like it never happened, or that it was just kind of a lost chapter. They did not reciprocate her mission to the extent that it was to get more money in artists' pockets and reimagine the organization. I imagine as a CEO, she reviewed contractors' roles and reviewed expenses, maybe cut some expenses. She has Substack posts where she talks about some of those decisions that she made too. Maybe implied that certain contractors who are used to getting the gig every single year at whatever price, that they maybe should have competed for it. Maybe it worked, maybe it didn't, but she's entitled to make those decisions at the CEO level. Of course she is. That's the job. That is what the job is.
Totally.
But they didn't like that, and so they kicked her out within a year.
Yeah, I mean, to which I might say that in some organizations, the CEO's job is to keep the board happy, which is not on paper what they should be doing necessarily, not always the right thing, but that, clearly was the case here, and she failed at that, and, got fired.
Right, because the board often decides who is the CEO, and so in that sense, there's that power dynamic. Yeah, that's true.
If a CEO fails to keep the board happy, they, don't continue being the CEO. Which is, that's kind of an unfortunate thing in these organizations. And I think that's like where, not to go too high level before we're done with the events of this, but that's why it's important that a board is aligned with the values, right? Like of the organization broadly, or at least the people that the organization is allegedly serving. So obviously the board is not particularly aligned with, say, smaller independent artists. The board is clearly aligned with the much more commercially successful artists, and then the vendors and contractors that work for the ECMAs. And again, it is maybe just a bit of a make work project. I have wondered when I've submitted to awards before, where I'm like, we go through so much as independent artists where really you're just like, you're paying rent. Like it's just going to someone who is like taking that money, and it's not really helping you. And, it's like, well, I guess you're just going to take that. So yeah, I'm not surprised that like she had to find out kind of the hard way, or a very kind of indirect way, that like, this is who that institution is for. But to like change that would require the board being different. And, the artist, I guess, could like eventually call for accountability or changes on the board.
This is a really crude oversimplification and arguably just completely wrong, but I do think this is kind of a way you could look at it. This situation is almost like if the Coastal Jazz board thing failed, but they succeeded. They did change all the people on the board, and they did get new staff in. Yeah. But this is almost like if the existing board had held on and quashed it.
Yeah, definitely. Even if like the makeup was different by one or two members, right? They could have been very different on the Coastal Jazz board. And it could have gone result maybe closer to this, where like a bunch of them, the creative directors and stuff, like changed, or different decisions were made about how the festival goes. Yeah, I think that's actually, yes, an oversimplification or kind of a clunky connection, but like, I think that's kind of right. And it's unfortunate that like, and there's no board for the board, right? Like the board is as high up as it goes. And so it would take generating a bunch of like public outcry, which is hard to do for something this regional and small and niche, like to replace any members of the board. So it's kind of just a tough situation.
There is another video that one of the employees who left made, where he talked recently in this late payment time about how he has heard that that camp of people, the anti-Blanche camp, are talking about how like, oh, the issues that led to this late payment, it's her fault. It's the fallout from her being there, that they're trying to frame it that way, that she's responsible even to this day for like them not having cash in the bank in May 2026, which is crazy.
That is crazy. Do you think Blanche was doing things that yourself, Will Chernoff, would do in her position? If you get into like, down the road, arts administration, you get a CEO position, you get in there and you go like, I don't love how we're spending money. Like, do you think you would have done similar moves as far as like, say, canceling contracts, shifting those requirements a little bit? What do you think?
Yeah, because I think that's what you think you're getting brought in to do. I think you think you're going to get brought in to put your stamp on things. And so it's weird if you try to do that and then there's this crazy amount of pushback all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounded like it was like an earnest effort to kind of like, it seems maybe heavy to use this word in this like much more, much serious context, but like there's like a cronyism that seems present throughout all of this, right? That like Blanche gets in, meets with this artist manager who's like, hey, good luck, hope you're better than the next guy, basically. And she's like, okay, that's weird. And then she like tries to just do her job, and that involves making some changes because like the way she saw it, she got in there and things aren't working as they should. And then instead of like being rewarded for that, she just gets let go. Which is like, I feel like the plot of many different like political thrillers where like some small town mayor gets in and it turns out a bunch of like old guys actually run the place, and you're not gonna be able to do what you set out to do here.
One of the things that I think of all the time this chapter in my career is that you just have to be in the mess together with your people, whatever organization you're working in. There's always a mess. There's always a big mess, but it's like, are you going to be in the mess together, or is it going to create an incompatibility that you cannot resolve and then you got to move on or it'll suck? But like, you got to find out what the mess is, and then you will be in the mess with your boss or your other people. And it's like, are you in the mess together or not?
Yes. I also think, now to go back to the late payments thing, and then really kind of everything that's transpired over the last year plus, it will be hard, and it was hard for Fort Langley, I think, at least for a bit, to like, you do need the trust of artists to have an arts organization. You know what I mean? Like, you can have this institutional stuff, but if like people are pulling out of not wanting to apply or not really wanting to perform like next year, like I'm sure people doing showcases will be a little more hesitant if they're like, well, some people didn't get paid or it took months. And then this whole thing happened with Blanche, who was just trying to probably make things a little more favorable to the artists and make more money in artists' pockets. Like, there's only so much of that an arts institution can pull and still survive. So I hope the ship gets righted, or, you know, we just like lose another arts institution.
Yeah, it could go into irrelevancy. There's another video that I didn't clip, but where Blanche is just talking and walking on Instagram, and it's like she played a show and she tried to like make a joke about the ECMA situation, found out that like all these young people in the audience didn't know about the story at all. And like, not only that, but they didn't know about the ECMAs at all.
Sure.
And this is like in the region. Yeah. And so it's like there's an irrelevancy that comes for it eventually too.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like also, the ECMAs and all these award show type things, like the artists are kind of your customers, right? If your income coming in is artists paying to apply to be considered, again, you need these applications, you need to keep these people somewhat happy, you need them, to stay relevant. That's how people are going to find out about it, as artists who are like, hey, I'm happy to be nominated, or I'm happy to, win the award one day. So,
and I guess she was trying to do things like maybe eliminate application fees to try and tip the scales towards the artist too, but that's a whole part of it. There's people who won't like that because it's like, oh, then the floodgates are open and then it's not the same. Yeah, so there's a fundamental disagreement there that she couldn't overcome.
Well, this is a very wild set of events. Thank you for reporting on this story.
So we're gonna round the corner here with Blanche's work is not done. She's still throwing things out there on her Substack that are ideas of how to accomplish this mission. And one of them, it resembles like the ticket levy or even the Cultural Land Trust, but I'd say more like the ticket levy, where she did a Substack where she proposes something that she calls the Atlantic Music Dividend, a cultural network that helps hospitality businesses across Atlantic Canada turn local music into a competitive advantage while generating recurring dividends for music workers. Yeah, there's a lot of buzzwords there too. Everybody's guilty of that, sure. But gets into a little bit of the details. Atlantic Canadian hospitality businesses voluntarily become Atlantic music partners by agreeing to levy a microcharge, say 25 cents or 2% on transactions. So this is very much like the UK ticket levy.
Cool.
Businesses receive curated access to our network of music workers. So this is almost like it's a union type strategy. It's a labor organizing type thing that's worked into it as well, which you can't get everybody to participate in, but like this camp of people who are rallying around Blanche, they would love something like that, so you could attempt to organize the labor that way. And then proceeds are held in trust by co-op organization. So there's that too. Mm-hmm. That's a subject we've talked about.
Yep.
And redistributed directly to participating music workers as modest, no strings attached taxable dividends. So this is an idea that she's substacking about these days as the ex-CEO and community advocate. So how do you feel about that suggestion with respect to all these other things that we've talked about that are similar to this idea?
That sounds like a cool implementation of it because it's at a small enough scale and the incentives seem right? Like a hospitality place wants to book a particular artist. So it's like, okay, well, you're going to do this levy thing because these group of artists are like in a coalition together, right? There's like that sort of labor union thing of like, if you want to do a quote unquote union gig, even though it's not a union, then we're going to do this levy, and that levy pays out to artists. Like the ticket one in the UK, I think that's a cool idea. I probably is not going to like take off like crazy. Like, I don't know how well that scales. Or rather, I don't know how effective that is at the small scale. And you need probably a lot of artists for it to like really, really take off. What do you think?
So there's the aspect of, there's the you just invented a bus nature of it, right?
Sure.
Where it's like you just invented a union, and the people who actually lived the musician's union life, they would say, well, this is like a pittance compared to what the union used to do for us back in the day. Why are you just settling for this and setting it up this way? And so that's the nuts and bolts of it, is they're like, well, we are a group, it's from the artist side, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, we are a group of artists who don't want to play at any of these places unless you agree to help us set up this fund that will over time help us. And we can grow the number of artists who are in our circle, and we can hopefully increase the number of venues who want to cooperate with us. But it's a labor employer union type struggle between some collection of artists that would be centered around like Blanche and these people, and some collection of venues that they would play. But then at the same time, they're not asking for that much, right? Like, they're not asking for a union scale wage. They're not asking for all the other demands that come with union gigs. You know, I'm involved with a nonprofit now that I'm on the board of, and there's a fellow board of director who had a very long and esteemed career as a union musician, and was like, we ended up chatting about random stuff. I ended up telling him, you know, man, I've never played a union gig in my life.
Yeah.
And he was like, what? That's really surprising. And I'm like, well, on one hand, it's like, I haven't actually been a out and out professional musician for that much of my life. A lot of it was even with a single band too.
Sure.
So I haven't been like out there trying to gig all the time. But yeah, I mean, even a lot of people who have, they probably don't play a lot of union gigs. It's totally different now.
Yes.
So on one hand, you could be like, you just invented a union. On the other hand, you could be like, well, that's never coming back. That's kind of how we've discussed it when it's come up before, is like, to get even close to that it just won't work in today's system. No venue would ever go for it.
Yeah, and I think it's like probably a useful kind of baby step towards that, right? You can increase your demands down the road if you get enough artists and enough negotiating power. You can, make that work differently. But I also think it's fine to start at that kind of small scale. Like, there's other things, yes, you would get out of a union as far as like labor conditions and minimum base pays and stuff. But like, to just say, hey, for now, if we're all indie anyway, not in this union, like, it's kind of a nice, small, easy to manage step. And, managing in a co-op, it sounds like it's sort of like set up in this nice way to prevent sort of any bad kind of corruption or just like nasty governance stuff that you might run into if you were to go too large scale or too close to a full-fledged union too quickly.
I'll go very far from my political roots, and I'll pose this closing question on the subject, which is, which of these two organizations do you think would be more beneficial to the Atlantic Canada music scene? One, the ECMAs as it has existed. Two, a union-like Atlantic Dividend artist organization that organized versus venues and tried to establish some sort of artist fund that way.
I mean, option B for sure. That's clearly right. Like, for the artist, that would be, and I think that's exactly the dichotomy Blanche is setting up, right?
And I think in the long run, I think even though this crazy controversy thing happened, I think she and people like her are gonna win. Because I think the ECMA type organizations are not going to be relevant, and the energy is going to be with this type of artist consciousness, and we can feel that. We have felt that over this show. That's why we started it. It's because we felt that.
100%. And I think more and more just lay people are also understanding that, and will be on the artist side going forward.
Yeah. So that's a walk over to the other coast. Stay tuned for the BreakOut West controversy. I hope not.
Yeah.
I think it's in Victoria this year. I think it's coming to BC. I never go. BreakOut West is really not my scene. I'm just going to pull out where it is so I can see. It was in Winnipeg last year.
Cool.
It was in Kelowna not long before. Yeah, it is in Victoria from September 30th to October 2nd. I'm not around anyways, but yeah, it's not really my scene. I don't really go.
Yeah, awards shows are kind of a funny thing. And it's like maybe more of a specific, like commercially successful, I don't know how much, probably a jazz category, but bit of a whole different scene.
Oh, you know what though? Okay, I do have to acknowledge something. I will.
What's up?
Which is that technically I'm nominated, sort of, not by name, but technically there is an industry award at the 2026 WCMAs that is the Impact in Music Marketing Award, and Cellar is nominated in this
That's
category.
funny. Okay, that's your job, right? You're the music marketer for.
I'll play nice on that front for sure.
Yeah, you might have to cancel your Japan trip and go to BreakOut.
Yeah, to make that appearance. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the crowd will be begging for you to be out there.
As they do.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for walking us through that. It's a very interesting story. We wish them the best, and we wish Blanche the best with that new endeavor. I think that's probably sounding a little more promising than the future of the ECMAs. Hope everyone gets paid also. I'm sure it might just take some time. Do you have a recommendation for folks?
I don't know about you, but because of the timelines that we've been having when we've been recording, I feel like I could have recommended so many things. I feel like I'm flush. So I'll pick one that led me to another, and then maybe I can kind of mention two.
Yeah, we could do it. We could do our three we sometimes do a three.
I think I've got two, so we could alternate. I could do one, then throw to you, and then come back to me, and then throw to you.
Deal.
Yeah, so my first one is on the label Mint Records, which is based here in Vancouver, but it's not a Vancouver band. It is a Canadian band. It's a Montreal band. The band is called Knitting, and the album is called Souvenir.
Knitting is very good. I have not heard the record yet. I will check that out.
Then you know that, you know what to expect, I suppose. Then, it's like indie rock, shoegaze,
Totally. Yeah, I've heard some Knitting stuff before. My first recommendation is an album by an artist called Sparkle Mami. It's spelled like Spark, letter L, Mami. I think she's from Chicago, and it's really nice. I guess just like alternative R&B, but like funky, a lot of just like really nice playing, like all the band work on it is really great. There's some really nice sax solos, lots of like jazz influence. It's a very Carson coded album, but it's very good in this body. What it's called. And what's your second rec while I scramble for my second rec?
So I'm going to go back to another rock album that came out earlier in the year now, but that I got led to because after I listened to Knitting and then some other similar albums, I ended up like browsing through, best of 2026 so far, and I was maybe in more of a mood to listen to rock, probably because I was recovering from the Jazz Fest or hiding from it during. And you may have already heard this, but I hadn't until just the last couple of weeks. Rat Boys is the name of the band.
I haven't heard
And
this.
the album is called Singing to an Empty Chair, which is also kind of a cool rock album with some great songs. So I'm going to put that one on there as well.
Sweet. I'll have to check that one out. Okay, my second is an album by an artist I also had never heard of before named Momoko Gill. The album is just titled Momoko. And I looked her up after like listening through it and being like, this is really nice. It's sort of, again, alternative R&B, but maybe like with more of like a spiritual jazz, like Alice Coltrane influence. It's got some like London jazz heavyweights affiliated or on it. I think Momoko played with one of the Sons of Kemet guys. I'm not sure who. The tuba guy is on this record at one point.
Theon Cross.
Yes, I believe he's on one of these tracks. Really nice playing throughout. Again, just kind of like alternative R&B, but again, more of this like jazz influence stuff. I've been really spinning it a lot over this last week. So that's my second rec.
That's great. Those are two I've never heard of, so I will look forward to checking them out.
Yeah, likewise on yours. I'll have to check out the knitting. What is it?
Rat Boys.
Rat Boys. Good.
Yeah.
Really
I think
good.
they're from Chicago or something. It's a U.S. band. Knitting's a Canadian band.
Yeah. I like the name Rat Boys. It's really good.
Yeah.
Well, another one in the books. We have a lot of adventures to go on before we meet the next time. You're going to record a record or something.
Yes. Yeah. So there'll be lots to think about after that. There's so much that I don't even know, but I guess it's kind of fun to be in the middle of something. You have no idea what's going to happen, but you think it's going to be fun one way or another. So it's a good place to be.
Yeah. It's a good, nice feeling to have the second half of summer coming up and just lots of possibility and lots of cool things coming up. So excited for you.
Yeah, I won't come back next month with another like controversy deep dive episode. We'll do something else.
Who knows what's going to happen in August? Things could fall apart.
Really, now we've jinxed it. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. Totally.
Anyways, that is a wrap for the time being. So on that note, we'll see you around.
See you around. Thanks, man.